Welcome back to Reddit Whispers. 45 years, 4 decades and a half of my life I gave to that company. I started as a kid, barely out of high school, sweeping floors and dreaming of a corner office. And I got it. I climbed that ladder, rung by painful rung, knuckles raw, back aching, missing school plays and family dinners, all for a single gleaming vision. A vision of retirement. Not just any retirement, mind you, but a golden age, mind you, but a golden age with Sarah, my Sarah, the woman who'd been by my side since I was 20. The image was so clear in my mind, it felt more real than the morning traffic I sat in for all those years. It was us, on a porch, somewhere warm, with a view of the ocean. The kind of place where the air smells of salt and sunscreen, where the biggest decision of the day is whether to have fish or chicken for dinner. I could picture the wicker chairs, the worn wooden deck, the 2 glasses of iced tea sweating in the humid afternoon. Her laughter, that sound that had been the soundtrack to my life, would be the only thing breaking the gentle rhythm of the waves. That was the deal. That was the promise I made to myself, to her. Every brutal 60-hour week, every missed vacation, every late night staring at spreadsheets until my eyes burned, it was all a deposit into that future, a down payment on our happily ever after. I wasn't just building a career, I was building our paradise, brick by painstaking brick. I'd point to brochures of coastal towns in the Carolinas, and she'd smile, that soft, patient smile. "Whatever you want, Mark," she'd say, "as long as we're together." And I believed her. God, I believed her. It never occurred to me that while I was laying the foundation for our dream house, she was quietly building a separate life in the shadows. The final years at work were the hardest. The pressure was immense, a relentless beast that chewed on my nerves and spit out anxiety. But the thought of that porch, of Sarah's hand in mine as we watched the sunset, was the fuel that kept me going. It was my mantra, my North Star. Just a little longer, Mark, I'd tell myself, almost there. My retirement party was a grand affair. The company pulled out all the stops, a fancy hotel ballroom, an open bar, a slideshow of my career from a fresh-faced kid to a silver-haired executive. My colleagues gave speeches full of jokes about my work ethic and my stubborn refusal to take a sick day. Sarah stood beside me, beaming, looking every bit the proud, supportive wife. She wore a blue dress that matched her eyes, the same color she'd worn on our first date. I remember looking at her that night under the soft lights and feeling a wave of such profound love and gratitude, it almost brought me to my knees. We'd made it. All the sacrifices, all the long years, they had finally paid off. I gave a speech, thanking everyone, but my final words were for her. "To my beautiful wife, Sarah," I said, raising my glass, "the wait is finally over. Our forever starts now." The room applauded, and she kissed me, a quick, public peck that felt a little cool. But I dismissed it. Nerves, I thought, the enormity of the moment. We went home that night, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't set an alarm. The feeling was glorious, a liberation I'd only dreamed of. The first few weeks were a blur of blissful inactivity. I slept in. I read the newspaper from front to back. I started a little vegetable garden in the backyard, something I'd always wanted to do. Sarah seemed happy enough. She'd bring me coffee in the garden, chat about her day with her friends, her book club. We talked about finally taking that trip to Italy, about visiting the kids more often. It was everything I had worked for, unfolding just as I had planned, or so I thought. The dream was so vivid, so meticulously constructed in my mind, that I failed to see the cracks forming in its foundation. I was so focused on the future I had built for us that I was completely blind to the present she was living without me. I had clocked out of the office for the last time, ready to clock in to our golden years. I had no idea she had already clocked out of our marriage long ago. It started subtly, as these things often do, little things that felt off, like a single note played out of tune in a familiar symphony. I was so steeped in the bliss of my newfound freedom that I initially brushed them aside, attributing them to the adjustment period. We were both learning a new rhythm after all. For 45 years, our lives had been dictated by the relentless tempo of my career. Now the music had stopped, and we were left in the quiet, learning to dance to a new, slower beat. Or at least I was. The first thing was her phone. It had become an extension of her hand, a permanent fixture in her palm. It was always angled away from me, and the screen would go dark the second I walked into a room. I'd ask who she was texting, and the answer was always a breezy, "Oh, just Carol from book club," or "my sister planning Mom's birthday." I'd known Carol and her sister for 30 years. Their conversations were never that urgent, that secretive. Then there were the errands that stretched for hours. A quick trip to the grocery store would turn into a 3-hour expedition. A visit to the gym would last the entire afternoon. When I'd ask what took so long, the excuses were always plausible yet vague. The traffic was a nightmare, or I ran into an old friend and we just got to talking. You wouldn't believe it. I wanted to believe it. I desperately wanted to believe that the life I had sacrificed everything for was real, that the woman I had given my heart to was the same person sleeping next to me at night. So I chose to ignore the nagging voice in the back of my head, the one that whispered that something was deeply wrong. I told myself I was being paranoid, that retirement had made me idle and insecure. I was a man without a purpose, a captain without a ship, and I was projecting my own anxieties onto her. But the signs kept coming, like breadcrumbs leading me down a path I didn't want to follow. There were the credit card statements with charges from restaurants I'd never heard of, in parts of town we never frequented. When I'd ask, she'd have a ready explanation. "That was a book club lunch, honey," or "I treated my sister to a nice dinner." The amounts were never huge, just enough to be noticeable, just enough to plant a seed of doubt. She started taking more care with her appearance, too. New clothes, a different hairstyle, a sudden interest in fancy lingerie. I tried to see it as a positive, a spark reignited. "You look beautiful," I'd tell her, hoping my compliments would be a bridge back to the intimacy we'd lost. But her response was always distant, a polite thank you before she turned away. The physical distance between us grew into a chasm. My touch, which she used to welcome, now seemed to make her flinch. She'd turn her back to me in bed, creating a wall of pillows between us. Our conversations became superficial, a dance around the elephant in the room that I was too afraid to name. We talked about the weather, the garden, the kids, anything but us. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon, about 3 months into my retirement. She told me she was going to a yoga class and then meeting friends for an early dinner. I was in the garage trying to fix a leaky faucet when I realized I needed a specific type of wrench from the hardware store. On my way there, I saw her car. It was parked outside a small, nondescript motel on the other side of town, a place I had no reason to ever go near. My blood ran cold. I pulled over, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. For a moment, I just sat there, staring, trying to make sense of it. It had to be a mistake, another car, the same model, the same color. But then I saw her. She came out of one of the rooms, laughing, her head thrown back in a way I hadn't seen in years. And she wasn't alone. A man was with her, his arms slung casually around her shoulders. He was tall, silver-haired, handsome in a way that made my stomach clench. He looked like the kind of man who played tennis at the country club, the kind of man I had always felt faintly inadequate around. He leaned down and kissed her, a long, lingering kiss that was anything but casual. It was a kiss of familiarity, of intimacy, of a shared history that I was not a part of. In that single, sickening moment, the carefully constructed world I had built for myself, for us, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The porch, the ocean view, the iced tea, it all dissolved into a cruel mirage. The 45 years of hard labor, the sacrifices, the missed moments with my children, they all flashed before my eyes, rendered meaningless by the scene unfolding in front of me. I felt a profound, hollow emptiness open up inside me, a void where my future used to be. I watched them get into his car, a sleek, expensive-looking sedan, and drive away. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the closed door of that motel room. It felt like hours. The wrench for the leaky faucet lay forgotten on the passenger seat. Everything was broken, and I had no idea how to even begin to fix it. I had retired from my job, but I was just beginning to understand the real work that lay ahead. The work of dismantling a life built on a lie. Driving home from that motel was like navigating through a fog. The familiar streets of our town looked alien, distorted. Every laughing couple I passed on the sidewalk felt like a personal insult, a mockery of my 45-year-long delusion. When I walked through the front door, the house felt different. The air was thick with the ghosts of unspoken words and decades of deceit. The photographs on the mantelpiece, our wedding, the births of our children, family vacations, seemed to sneer at me, relics from a life that had never truly existed. I was a stranger in my own home, a visitor in the museum of my own failed marriage. When Sarah returned a few hours later, she was humming. She breezed into the kitchen, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright with a happiness that had nothing to do with me. "Hi, honey," she said, her voice light and cheerful. "Yoga was amazing, just what I needed." The lie was so effortless, so practiced, it knocked the wind out of me. I stood there, silent, my hands gripping the edge of the kitchen counter so hard my knuckles turned white. She finally noticed my silence, the rigid set of my shoulders. Her smile faltered. "Mark, is everything okay? You look pale." My voice, when it finally came, was a rasp, a sound I didn't recognize as my own. "Where were you, Sarah?" Her face, a canvas of feigned innocence, immediately hardened. "I told you, I was at yoga, then dinner with the girls." She was so good at it, the casual deflection, the subtle gaslighting that had probably worked for years. But I had seen the truth with my own eyes. The image of her kissing that man outside the motel room was burned onto the back of my eyelids. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice shaking with a rage that was cold and deep. "I saw you at the Crestview Motel with him." The color drained from her face. For a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes, the terror of being caught. But it was quickly replaced by a cold, defiant glare. The mask of the loving, patient wife fell away, revealing the stranger beneath. And in that moment, I realized I had never truly known the woman I had spent my life with. The confrontation that followed was not the explosive, dramatic scene you see in movies. There was no screaming, no throwing of plates. It was something far worse, a cold, clinical dismantling of our shared history. She didn't deny it. In fact, she seemed almost relieved that the secret was finally out. She spoke of her other life with a chilling detachment, as if she were describing a character in a book. His name was David. He was a real estate developer she had met at a charity function over a decade ago. 10 years. For 10 years, while I was working myself into an early grave to build our future, she was living a separate, parallel life with another man. Every book club meeting, every long lunch with her sister, every errand that took hours, it was all him. He was the one she shared her dreams with, her fears, her laughter. I was just the provider, the stable, reliable fixture in the background of her real life. The man who paid the mortgage and funded her secret afternoons in cheap motel rooms. She told me she had been unhappy for years, that she felt neglected, that I was always working, always absent. The accusations were like daggers,
each one twisting in the raw wound of my betrayal. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that I was working for her, for us, for the dream she had supposedly shared. But what was the point? The dream was a lie. Our entire life was a lie. The most devastating blow came when she talked about the future. "I don't love you anymore, Mark," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "I haven't for a very long time. I was waiting for you to retire, for the kids to be settled."
I didn't want to disrupt things. The cold, calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. I wasn't a husband to her. I was a project, a long-term investment that had finally matured. She had waited patiently for her payout, and now that my retirement funds were secure, she was ready to cash out and start her new life with David. The rest of that night is a blur of pain and disbelief. I packed a bag in a daze, moving through our bedroom like a ghost. Every object was a painful reminder of our shared past. The quilt her grandmother made for our wedding, the photograph of us on our honeymoon, the 2 rocking chairs we had bought for the front porch of our dream retirement home. I drove to a hotel, the irony not lost on me. I, too, was now a resident of a cheap, anonymous room, just like the one where my life had been officially pronounced dead. I lay on the stiff, unfamiliar bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and for the first time in my life, I felt utterly and completely alone. The silence in that room was deafening, a stark contrast to the noise that had filled my head for the past few hours. The vision that had sustained me for 45 years, the porch, the ocean, the shared laughter, was gone, replaced by a vast, terrifying emptiness. The golden years I had worked so hard for had been stolen from me before they had even begun. I had retired into a wasteland. The divorce was swift and brutal. Lawyers, depositions, the cold, impersonal language of asset division. Our life together was reduced to a series of numbers on a spreadsheet. The house was sold. The retirement accounts were split. Half of everything I had worked my entire life for was handed over to the woman who had systematically betrayed me for a decade. The finality of it was staggering. One signature on a piece of paper and 45 years of shared history were erased. I was no longer a husband. I was just a man, adrift in a life I no longer recognized. The emptiness that followed the divorce was a living, breathing entity. It was my constant companion, sitting next to me in the driver's seat of my car, lying beside me in the too-big bed of my sterile new apartment. The silence was the loudest thing I had ever heard. For years, my life had been filled with the noise of purpose. The early morning alarm, the commute, the ringing phones at the office, the hum of a life being built. Now, there was nothing. Just the ticking of a clock, each second a reminder of the vast, unstructured desert of time that stretched out before me. My retirement, the promised land I had journeyed toward for so long, had turned out to be a barren exile. The first few months were a struggle just to get out of bed. The simple act of making coffee or taking a shower felt like a Herculean task. What was the point? There was no one to share my morning with, no schedule to keep, no future to work towards. I was a ship without a rudder, tossed about on a sea of grief and regret. I would find myself driving aimlessly for hours, ending up in front of our old house, now owned by a young family whose happy shouts echoed from the backyard where I had planned to build my garden. It was a form of self-torture, I suppose, a way to keep picking at the wound to make sure it was still real. The anger came in waves, a hot, bitter tide that threatened to consume me. I was angry at Sarah, at David, at the world, but mostly I was angry at myself. Angry for my blindness, for my naive belief in a future that was nothing more than a fiction I had written in my own head. How could I have been so stupid? The signs were all there in hindsight. The late nights she attributed to book club, the secret smiles at her phone, the growing emotional distance between us. I had chosen to see what I wanted to see, to believe in the dream, because the alternative was too terrifying to contemplate.
I spent countless nights replaying our life together, searching for the exact moment when it all went wrong, the point at which the woman I loved became a stranger. Was it a gradual erosion or a single cataclysmic event? Had she ever truly loved me, or was I always just a means to an end, a stepping stone on her path to someone else? These questions haunted me, turning my memories into a minefield of doubt and suspicion. The well-meaning advice from friends and family was a constant barrage. You need to get out more, Mark. Join a club. Try online dating. They didn't understand that my betrayal wasn't just the loss of a partner. It was the loss of my entire reality. The past I thought I knew was a lie, and the future I had banked on had been foreclosed. I was grieving not just a marriage, but the very foundation of my identity. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to shift. It started with small acts of defiance against the emptiness. I forced myself to go for a walk every morning, not because I enjoyed it, but because it was something to do, a way to mark the passage of time. I started cooking for myself again, not just frozen dinners, but real meals. The simple act of chopping vegetables, of following a recipe, was a small anchor in the chaos of my emotions. One day, I found myself at a local animal shelter, just looking. I left with a scruffy, one-eyed terrier mix named Buster. He was a mess, just like me. He was scared and anxious and didn't trust anyone. We were a perfect match. Taking care of him gave me a reason to get up in the morning. His unconditional affection, his simple, uncomplicated joy at the sight of a tennis ball, began to chip away at the ice around my heart. I started talking to other dog owners at the park, simple, easy conversations about the weather and our pets. It was the first time I had felt a sense of community, of connection, since my world had imploded. I'm not going to pretend that I'm completely healed. The scars of Sarah's betrayal are still there, a permanent part of my landscape. There are days when the emptiness threatens to swallow me whole, when the ghost of the future I lost comes back to haunt me. But I'm learning to live with it. I'm discovering that retirement isn't about a destination, it's about a journey, one that I am now navigating on my own terms. I've started volunteering at the animal shelter, helping other broken creatures find a second chance. I've taken up woodworking, finding a quiet satisfaction in creating something solid and real with my own hands. I'm slowly, painstakingly building a new life, one that isn't based on a shared dream, but on my own, solitary reality. The golden years I envisioned are gone forever. But maybe, just maybe, I can find a different kind of light in the years I have left. A quieter, more subdued glow perhaps, but one that is entirely my own. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear from you what moment in your life made you see someone for who they truly were. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to Reddit Whispers, where the real stories get told.